Hello, thank you for joining me on what's going to be, I suppose, another of those not very well planned rambles that I sometimes do. There's going to be a bit of intrusion street noise. I've got to do this with the windows open. If you're anywhere on this latitude, you will be experiencing, well, for instance, I'm dangling a bag of ice cubes in the fish tank because the thermometer is above the tropical scale, so I imagine they might not be having too much of a good time in there. So I don't know if this is a good tactic, but bagged up some ice cubes and try and bring the temperature down to something more sensible in there. But anyway, so yeah, unusual climatic conditions. That's by the by, I suppose. I am today going to be burbling on about, I'm probably quite late to the party with this. It only just kind of came to my attention that there is such a thing as red flag books, or red flag books for men, more specifically, which kind of, I did a double take the first time I saw, I think it was something here on YouTube about that, and I was going, well, they're talking about red flag books, and so I investigated further. Now, it would be a bit cheeky of me to be trying to put it out there that there are books you shouldn't own. I mean, given some of the ones I've talked about in here, you're not going to buy that from me. You know, the fact that you own a book doesn't mean that you're espousing the attitudes therein necessarily. But I suppose I was slightly curious about this thing that, there are these red flag books, and it seems to be, I haven't yet looked at it. Are there red flag books for women? I don't know. I've not looked into that. I haven't done my homework really. I suppose I should look before spouting off. But anyway, we're going to be talking specifically about the guy ones here. This kind of area or genre. Well, it's not one genre. It's, I suppose, a sort of area of literature that you might describe as kind of douchey bro literature. Very loosely, which it also struck me, a lot of these lists, there's a lot of it is a crossover with, if you go back 20 years or so, back when we had a lot more high street record shops and there was still, a lot of HMVs and things around the place. Someone, I forget who it was, somebody did a satirical article about the books you only see for sale in record shops, right? If you're old enough to remember this, if you went into a record shop back then, there'd be a sort of little book section, and it would always be the same sort of stuff, right? It would always be like Fear and Loathing, things of that general. What's the other one? You'd always get Catch-22. You'd always get some William Burroughs. You'd usually get some Irving Welsh and so on. And there does seem to be a little bit of crossover with what now is described as red flag books for men. So anyway, I scrolled through these various lists, and you notice that certain titles seem to occur on all of them. And the good news is there's only one of these titles, of the regular candidates, there's only one that I own a copy that I would consider it a worthwhile book. And there's others in there that I've read, but there's only one time. Anyway, we'll come back to that. The ones I've read that turn up regularly, these are ones I've read in the past but haven't really retained a copy of. I suppose this is kind of thematic for me because I did recently, I don't know if anyone else out there sometimes experiences this, that you pick something up that when you were years younger you thought was a book that spoke to you and was, I suppose you might have imagined, was a bit edgy and then you sort of look at it 20 years later or so or more, and I went through this recently. I'm not putting the book down because I still enjoy it and I still think it's a worthwhile bit of writing, and I like other stuff the author wrote, but I did recently pick up a copy of Last Exit to Brooklyn by Hubert Selby Jr. and I hadn't read it in a very long time, and I think when I first picked it up, I was probably still in my 20s back then. I saw the film first. I'd just seen the film before I read the book, the film with Jennifer Jason Leigh, and then picked up the paperback, and it definitely did something for me at the time. And I read it about a month ago or a couple of months ago again, and I did kind of feel Well, this is being deliberately unpleasant, and I don't quite get the same cool and edgy kick off it that I might have that long ago. That's not to say I don't still, I think I prefer that author's works. I think I prefer Requiem for a Dream, which is also pretty bloody dark. But I did feel that Last Exit to Brooklyn was, it just barely lets any light in at all. There's just so few redeeming qualities to most of the characters within it. It did feel a bit overdone, maybe. You might not agree, I don't know. But anyway, so I think around about the same point that I realised there are red flag books. Not that that one comes up on these lists very often, to be fair. But, like, for instance, one that does come up a lot, and I did read, and I think I sort of enjoyed it. I think I borrowed the book and never felt the need to buy it since, but that was American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. And, I think I read it at the time as, I suppose, a critique of the mindset of yuppiedom and the kind of greed is good type of mindset. I think, there were some really unpleasant and gratuitous aspects to it. I did kind of enjoy the weird little musical interludes when he starts ranting on about what he's kind of shit he's got on CD. But I haven't read that probably since the 90s, and I don't know if I'd get on with it now if I tried. But anyway, other titles that do come up are things by Michel, I can't pronounce his surname, Houellebecq, probably getting that wrong. I did read one, Atomized. I've never felt the need to read more by him, so I don't have any of that on my shelves. What else? Catcher in the Rye. I think I maybe read that in my teens and haven't revisited since. I don't remember a whole lot about it. The other things that come up quite a lot, I've certainly never read Ayn Rand. I don't know if I'm particularly likely to. Aren't we living her? That's plenty, it seems to me. Apart from that, A Clockwork Orange, I have read it. I don't own a copy of the book. I think I have the disc of the film tucked away somewhere. Now, it strikes me that, yes, there's a lot of nastiness and gratuitous unpleasantness to that, but it sort of took the point of that it provocatively is asking questions about the nature of right and wrong and responsibility for our behaviour and so on. I've never read Fight Club. I've never seen the film of Fight Club, believe it or not. I don't feel that blokey or out. I'm imagining it to be a sort of blokey, alpha-ish kind of thing, and I just feel that's my orientation particularly, so it's just never been particularly tempting to me. I can't really make a judgment call on it. Now, the title that comes up a lot and that I do have a copy of, and maybe this is the kind of most problematic one of all, I don't know, but I do have to hold my hand up to owning a copy of Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Now, I suppose there's no good choice for cover art for this book, is there? That one, yeah. Obviously, the subject area of Lolita is pretty problematic. It goes there, but it puts you in the head. You're looking through the eyes of the perpetrator. You are confronted with his rationale behind his appetites. It's not easy stuff. However, again, it's probably more than 10 years since I've read this, and I didn't read it until, it's not like something I picked up when I was at college or anything. I didn't read this book probably till my 30s, I think. I think what happened was, I knew of it by reputation, but I think at some point, whatever film channel I was watching, the black and white, the Kubrick film of Lolita popped up, which had James Mason in it, and I'm a sucker for James Mason. He's pretty magnetic in whatever he does, and he does do, he could play a very congenial character with no problem, but he could do sinister so well. I think the first thing I noticed him in as a kid was his performance in Salem's Lot, where he plays, this very urbane, charming sort of gentleman, but at the same time he's creepy as. And similarly in Lolita, he just conveys yuckiness so well. I mean, you know, he's educated, he's well mannered, he has a charm about him, but he just radiates. But, you know, and then, what did I pay, 50p for that? I think it was in a charity shop in Southend, if I remember this rightly. I thought, well, all right, you've seen the film, so, see what the fuss is all about and read the book. And I did think it was an incredible bit of writing. I did feel it was very accomplished, a very accomplished bit of work, and very clever with words, and whatever you think of the subject matter, it's just an incredible bit of writing. And I think a sort of brief social media sounding out of my contemporaries, and this doesn't just include men, by the way, but that still seems to be more or less the consensus. That, you know, I mean, I don't think we're supposed to empathise with Monsieur Humbert or identify with his. I mean, it's a story of a doomed man. It's almost like this Captain Ahab-like fixation with what can only be his own doom or destruction. And, you know, there are other things on my shelves here. Maybe we'll come to some of those at a later time that for some reason don't feature on these lists, but you know, I can talk about books that are or deal with things that are, you know, questionable or reprehensible or morally repugnant, and it doesn't mean they're not worthwhile bits of literature, but you know, they go there, they go into the crevices. But sometimes isn't that what art is supposed to do? You know, it's supposed to investigate all aspects of our condition as a species, maybe. Look at me getting my pretentious wanker hat on, but that's my feelings on it anyway. So yeah, you know, I suppose up to a point when you know, if you get an idea of what their go-to books are, you know, it might give you some insight into where they're at inside their head. But you know, I don't think that's a reason why art or literature shouldn't be, you know, digging through the trash, if you like. Anyway, I don't think I have anything particularly profound to say on this subject. It's just something that sort of diverted me a bit, the whole red flag book phenomenon. But, you know, it's not like any of these lists. For some reason, none of these lists feature Eat Them Alive by Pierce Nace, nor none of them feature Peter Cave or Richard Allen books for some whatever reason, you know. So, there you go. But anyway, you may want to pitch in with your thoughts in the comments. Let's see. But that's me on that one as far as I can muster tonight. Thank you again, and hopefully join me soon. Thanks.